So, first, this is transforming the SDLC and Agile testing with Generative AI. My name is Robert Rose. So, full disclosure, if you happen to have walked through the hallways yesterday or today and noticed the posters that had all the speakers, you probably didn't see my face. You would see me on the programs and outside on the screen, but I wasn't on the big posters because I'm filling in for Dr. Pavan, who was supposed to originally give this workshop, and the one later this afternoon. He had something come up where he wasn't able to attend, so I volunteered to fill in for him on about 2 weeks' notice. So I guess I like punishment. I don't know. So I'll be here. I'm going to do my best to give you the same type of workshop and presentation that he would have provided for you. However, I did just get all this material a few days ago. So a little less than a week ago. And I have to give this workshop and then the one this afternoon. So I've got to talk for about 3.5 hours each. And I just got all this information a few days ago. So because of that, I will be a little dependent on my notes over here. So if you see me walking around and kind of checking my notes regularly, it's just because, again, I don't really fully haven't put these slides together. Dr. Pavan, these are his presentations and the slides that he provided for me. So I had to go through and kind of digest this information and figure out the way that I want to be able to present that. So again, if you just see me kind of check my screen frequently, it's because I'm substituting on late notice here. Part of that is that I want this workshop to be as interactive as possible. I know some people, when they hear that, they kind of cringe a little bit and they don't like that idea, especially in our field, in our area, because sometimes the people that in our area, in our field, aren't necessarily the most extroverted. At least I know I'm not. So again, whenever they have to work with others, they're not too happy about that. But I do feel that is something that is important. I'm sure most of you know that different people learn in different ways, right? You have some people that learn best by hearing, some that learn best by seeing, and many of us learn best by doing, right? To actually just get in there with our hands and do the thing that we're trying to learn. So always try to incorporate all three of those learning styles when I'm teaching, and today will be no different. I just want us to, again, try to be a little bit interactive. So we have a few activities throughout the workshop today where I will be asking you to work together. You can work together with your table or maybe pair a couple of tables together and work just to get some exercises, okay? So let me just tell you a little bit about myself since, again, I'm kind of just filling in for Dr. Pavan. My name is Robert Rose. I am from the University of Memphis in Memphis, Tennessee. If you're not aware or familiar with Memphis, it's where Elvis is from. That's usually where internationally where we can tie people in. And maybe if you don't know about Elvis, that's where FedEx is headquartered. So that's the world headquarters for FedEx. So anybody not heard of Memphis, Tennessee? Oh, one. Okay, well that's good. I'll take that. But again, I'm from the University of Memphis. I have been there for about 17, January will be 18 years that I've been there. I teach all kinds of different things. I teach some foundational courses for freshman students working on their undergraduate degrees. I teach graduate courses on LLMs and machine learning. So it kind of just depends on what's needed at the time. I just fill in pretty much everywhere. So anyway, so that's enough about me. So today, again, we're going to talk about generative AI and how we can transform that SDLC, or software development lifecycle, using generative AI. So why this is important is pretty simple. How many of you, I don't really know the audience, are you developers, testers? How many of you are just testing? Okay, quite a few. Any of you just develop? None. So we're almost all testers. Okay, good deal. All right, so in testing, what we see is that a lot of time we're being asked to do a whole lot with less, right? We see this especially in the US. We see this whole lot, do more with less. That's what we're always told, right? We get reduction in resources and you have to do still more. And in doing that, we have a lot of systems that we are expected to test and to push out and to roll into production, but they're increasingly complex. We have stricter timelines, and now we're being asked to integrate AI a lot of times into those systems. And that can make it very difficult because we're in constant pressure more and more. And we've seen what happens when testing can't keep up, right? We oftentimes, if we don't have adequate testing, our systems can have very costly mistakes. And when I'm talking about costly mistakes, I mean costly in not only tangible money and how much an organization can lose, but also in reputation and your brand, and not being able to recover from those costly mistakes. And we'll talk about a couple of those today, some of those examples. So what happens when we can't keep up with that? Again, we have those costly mistakes. So what we want to do and what today's workshop is going to cover is integrating AI into that testing. And that can be very scary for some of us. We hear AI and some of us get anxious. We think to ourselves, AI is coming for our jobs, right? We think AI maybe is a bubble, it's a buzzword. There's a lot of different things associated with artificial intelligence and a lot of uncertainty associated with it. And I'm hoping that by the end of this workshop, we'll have a little bit of that anxiety put to rest, and we can feel just a little bit better about artificial intelligence and how that can help us in our testing. So a way that AI can help us is to not replace testers, but it's to augment us, to accelerate, and to ensure that we're able to keep up with the demands that we're receiving from developers and from leadership. So by the end of this session, again, we're going to leave with not just concepts, not just theory, but we're going to have some practical examples, some practical exercises that hopefully you can take back to your teams to be able to implement and help you through the process of doing great testing so we don't have those costly mistakes. Facilitate. The problem with this is that because of the politicians in the US, the requirements changed constantly. And so the portal, the system, was having to change constantly. What do you think that meant for testing, right? It made it really, really difficult. So when the system was rolled out, it was a failure. It was horrible. It did not work. It took over a year to get the system stable. And I don't have the numbers on it, but the US lost a lot of money. Again, because those constant requirements were constantly changed, okay? And testing wasn't adequate. All right. So again, here's some pain points that we'll talk about in detail with our SDLC. All right, so again, I won't spend too much time because we talked about this, and we'll go into detail in just a minute. But planning, unclear objectives, success metrics, unrealistic timelines, testing not really considered when we're doing the planning or when developers are doing the planning. A lot of teams budget for development hours, but not really enough for testing. And then they want to know why we have so many defects and why things break. I feel like IS is one of those areas where you get all of the blame and none of the credit, right? When something works, well, it's just supposed to work. It's fine. You don't get credit for that. But when something breaks, oh, now you're the bad guy. Well, what about all the good work that I did? That doesn't matter, right? If your uptime's 99.9%, they want to focus on the 0.1, right? So anyway, they want to know, why things broke when they didn't give us the resources that we needed. In our requirements, a lot of times we have, again, those non-functional requirements that are ignored. They don't focus a lot on security, and then want to know why you have some PII leaked. In our design, some brittle architecture, right? Maybe we have integrations that break a whole lot because we weren't able to fully look at the architecture and to see how our systems integrated with one another. Or maybe the system that's being developed and integrated just isn't tested well, and so it doesn't work as intended. In our development, we have flaky continuous improvement pipelines. That leads to feedback delays, right? So we don't know how to continuously improve. We're not getting the information there as we needed. We have rush in coding that leads to a technical debt where you have to play catch up. In our testing pain points, a lot we see test cases that are written really late. Quality assurance then becomes a bottleneck because, again, we have that information very late, like I said, with that US healthcare portal. We have lack of testing data or even unstable environments because you're trying to figure out what test data to get. I know I've had to go through in Excel before and try to create random test data using random functions, right? Just to create some type of data that you can use to test your systems. That's definitely a pain point. In deployment, that rollback strategy, again, we need to make sure we have that. Maintenance, you have model drift, environmental changes, your unpatched vulnerabilities. Again, with all these things that I've talked about, AI can help. And we'll talk about how that's going to help. It's going to help us clarify some of these requirements. We can help it, use it to help us generate test cases and test data. It can look and monitor your logs to try to find errors or vulnerabilities that exist. It can even simulate failure scenarios for us. And we'll look at solutions shortly. It's going to be a long session. All right, so think about your projects, okay? How much time you spend just making sense of everything? Stakeholders, they give you their stories and the things that they need. Developers document that. They often will pass that on to you. You'll have some type of expectation from your stakeholders, what the requirements the system is to have, things you're supposed to test for. But when our developers are going through and looking at that, that's a lot of work, or whoever's compiling that and summarizing that. That's a lot of work. I've had to do this myself. One time when I was a young employee at the university, the first thing that I ever had to do was to lead a system development for the whole university, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was in my early 20s. I was clueless. I was told to get this system developed and get it pushed out by X date. And I just had to learn on the fly. I had to build the plane as I was flying. And one of the most challenging things for me was to get all the requirement stories from all of the different stakeholders. Because the challenge that you find there is that one stakeholder will say one thing, another stakeholder will say something completely different. How do you know which one to listen to? You'll have two stakeholders that will say the same thing. Well, that's good because that's valid. But what happens when you have 100 stakeholders saying the same thing? Well, now you've got to go through all of that duplication, right? So you need help summarizing, right? And again, that's just with our requirements. We can help summarize. Estimate. We've talked about this in some of our pain points. We need to be able to have good timelines to figure out how we're able to provide a good timeline for our system, for our development, for our testing. How can we best do that? Well, AI can help us in that endeavor. Generate options. This comes a lot with our architecture, right? And with our test cases. We need to be able to have multiple options, to be able to see if we do this, how is this going to work? How is this going to integrate? How much is this going to cost? How much time will this take? So if we do this ourselves and manually go through that process, that can be extremely painful. It's a lot of that grunt work, a lot of that tedious work that takes a long time. AI can help us with that. So it can free us up to do some of those other things. Check that consistency, right? To be able to go through and make sure that everything is consistent. Think about that Mars orbiter from NASA. If we would have been able to check that we were all using standard, metric, or imperial instead of two different ones, it would have saved some embarrassment and would have saved some money and some time. Again, all we needed was just to be consistent. One of the things that I teach, this is an aside, but one of the things that I teach my development class is that we don't really think about consistency and symmetry very much in development. But it's very, very important. Human nature is to look for consistency. When you look around your room at home or even here, you notice that almost always the light switches are at the same height. You'll notice the outlets, for the electrical outlets, they're always at the same height. You don't have a light switch here and then one here and here. That would just make you feel uncomfortable. Human nature, and this is, research has shown this, the way that we define beauty is by symmetry. It's that when an eye lines up with the other eye, one side of the nose lines up, your ears, right? It's what we're looking for is that a face is symmetrical. We want symmetry. We want consistency. And if we have a system that's not consistent, A, it may not work very well, but you have the potential for it not to be used as well because your stakeholders look at that and they don't want to. I don't know. You ever used a system, even a website like Amazon or whatever, and they roll out a new update and you just can't put your finger on it, but you just don't like it. Yes, it's changed, but a lot of times that's because they've messed with that consistency there. So anyway, consistency is very, very important. And also, AI can help us generate next steps. So we've completed this, and we've completed this, and completed this. What is it that we need to do next? It can help us in that endeavor. All right, we're going to talk about these different phases. I'll give you some bullet points and some different cases for each of these phases, some problems, and we'll talk about some prompts that you could use with AI to help alleviate those problems, and what metrics that we would hope to improve with those that AI usage. Okay? So let's talk about this first one. So again, this is in our planning and requirements analysis. So that first phase. So the first thing we have is to auto-synthesize alignment. So the problem that this would solve with AI and how we could address that is looking at the misalignment between stakeholders. Again, what happens, if I were to ask everyone here what your favorite drink is, I'd probably have a lot of different answers. Because we all have different opinions. If I were to ask you your favorite color, we'd all have different answers, right? Because we all like different things. We all use systems differently. And when we're trying to get that information from stakeholders for a system, that's no different. So we have different values that are aligned there. AI can help us with that because it can help us prioritize. First, it can look at all of our stories that we've collected from our stakeholders. It can summarize those. It can find the commonalities. It can find the differences. It can look at the priorities, and it can pinpoint those. It can help us with unclear metrics. What is a success metric? We will get our requirements from our stakeholders, but how do we put a value on that? How do we know what's more important or not? AI can help us with that. And again, contradictory goals. One person's role may dictate that they want their system, their tool, to function differently than someone else, right? So again, AI can help us with that. The ways that it can do that is, again, it can summarize those stakeholder stories, those meeting notes. It can pull out objectives and those non-functional requirements and KPIs. So we can look at all those stories and manually pull that out without having to have a junior team member or someone go through and manually look at every single story, all that data we've collected, and manually pull that out. One of the things that we know about humans is that we make a lot of errors, right? Just like I did. I hit the wrong button, hit the end button. We make a lot of errors. That's just human nature, right? I'm a baseball fan. I love baseball. They're trying to replace umpires with robot umpires because there's too many balls and strikes that are not called correctly. Because the human eye is not perfect. We make a lot of mistakes. And when we're trying to pull out those stories from our stakeholders, we may key in something incorrectly. We may not find the right objectives or the right metrics. A prompt example that you could use here, again, as you see in this bullet, is to take your notes and say, from these notes, list the goals, the KPIs, the risks, and then flag those